Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I hope you all had a good evening with your students yesterday. Hopefully you got the restaurant reservations that you wanted and had a chance to relax, and I'm glad there's some sunshine. My name is Hugh Wynn. I am Vice President for Advancement and College Relations here at Reed College. Been here for 4 months as of Thursday, and it's been an exciting period for me, transition as well as the opportunity to learn about Reed and all the aspects that make it so special. I have the honor this morning of introducing you to President Audrey Bilger, and with that, I am going to ask her to come on up. Some of you may know her from your years with your students here, but if you're brand new, she's amazing, fantastic, and one of the reasons why I'm here. So, thank you.
Give me 1 second. Good morning, everyone. I am so happy to be here, and as I was saying at the reception last night, if some of you were there when I was making remarks kind of midway through, that I'm really happy to be talking to you this morning on this particular topic. It turns out when you become a college president, it does turn you away from that line of research that, for me, research and teaching, where I had spent most of my career, 25 plus years. And so talking about how my research connects to what I do now is a nice thing. I wanted to say how happy I am that you're here and that you're here for your students and that you've made time for this program today. And I hope the various things that you're checking in on about the college this weekend are inspiring to you, and I know we've got lots of good people in the room on our team here at Reed who are happy to talk with you if you have questions or want to share how much your student is appreciating Reed. We certainly like to hear that. So today, this is a version of a keynote I was invited to give, actually today also, at a conference that's taking place downtown, put on by the Council of Independent Colleges for Chief Academic Officers. That is, provosts and deans of the faculty. That was my previous role, and so it gives me a lot of pleasure to go and talk to that group about the work that we all do. Since I was asked to talk about college leadership, it occurred to me, I don't know, kind of as I was finishing my remarks for that this week, hey, I imagine that parents would like to hear this too, because it gives you a sense of where I come from, and I'd say that the where I come from is very much where those who work here come from. We're very service-oriented. We're here because we believe in the mission of higher ed. And for my part, I highly value the model that we have here at Reed, which I think is distinctive and also quite precious. I work to steward and protect it. So I will begin. It is a truth universally acknowledged that any talk or paper on Jane Austen must begin with a reference to her most famous opening line. Now, those of you who know this line, I'll just read it. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Now, as close readers of Pride and Prejudice know well, the word universally here is highly ironic, as is the word truth. It's explored and taken apart over the course of the novel. Far from being a universally acknowledged truth, rich men needing wives is what hopeful mothers such as Mrs. Bennet firmly believe, and they want their daughters to be those wives. And so this statement, which seems at the beginning to be stating some fact, is quite complicated and the opposite of that. Rather than being a self-evident truth, the statement put in context is deeply self-interested from every angle. For my purposes today, I want to appropriate that phrase of truth universally acknowledged to say that these days it is a truth universally acknowledged, seemingly, when you pick up the press or talk to many people that you know, that I know, that college leadership has become impossible and punishing, And there are articles like, why would anybody want to be a college president? Or headlines every time you open the news about this or that college president stepping off, and some very high profile and ugly departures that are really hard to watch. What we know is that the average terms of college presidents and chief academic officers continue to go down. At this point, the numbers are fewer than 6 years for presidents, fewer than 5 years for chief academic officers. And so what we know is that these jobs can be really hard. That goes without saying. It is also important for us to recognize that colleges actually do need leadership and key officers. Presidents are a fundamental role for college. We're written into constitutions and bylaws, and the chief academic officer, provost, is generally considered to be second in command. So when we vilify administration and point fingers, I think it's also good to remember we need these roles, and we need to be able to work together. What we also know is that constant turnover in college leadership can be destabilizing for our institutions. That's why leaders have to be clear about why we do this work. The stakes are quite high, and so also must be our ideals. If we believe, and I believe firmly, that education serves the common good and is of enormous benefit to humanity, we owe it to the future of our schools and to the future to do our very best. For my part, when in doubt and in times of stress, I ask myself, what does the college need from its president? And then I strive to act accordingly. I'm here to say that Jane Austen can help, and I'm happy to share some of the lessons I've learned from her. Now first, and of course I have to show a slide of how beautiful our campus is to the constituents I'll be seeing today. Reed College is a gorgeous setting for college leadership. I'm in my 6th year of my presidency at Reed. I'm Reed's 16th president. I'm the first woman. I'm the first openly gay president. As you well know, Reed is distinctive in our focus on academic rigor. We don't have intercollegiate athletics, we don't have fraternities and sororities. Students who come here because they like school. They're independent-minded students, and we have world-class faculty here. So we like to refer, and this has been something that my dean of the faculty, I think, coined this phrase a few years back. We like to talk of ourselves as being on an intellectual playground. That's what it looks like. We're quite lucky. Prior to taking this position, I was a chief academic officer at Pomona College, and prior to that, an English professor at Claremont McKenna for 22 years, and then before that, I was at Oberlin College. Now, in spite of that long length of time in liberal arts colleges, I am myself the product of public higher ed. I was an undergrad at Oklahoma State. I didn't know that schools like this existed. After I got my PhD at the University of Virginia, as I was looking at jobs and interviewed at Oberlin for a visiting position, I decided to take that visiting position over 2 tenure-track offers because I fell in love. I fell in love with the idea of the small classes, the close relationship, the ability to work with bright and talented students as they figure out what their next steps will be. So, that being said, in our line of work, we'll talk about my path to the presidency as a traditional one. I came up from the faculty, and there were times when the majority of college presidents came from the faculty. These days, you'll find college presidents coming from other areas of colleges and universities, and even from outside the college. It makes sense to me coming here that I come from this line of work and that I've been steeped in liberal arts education because I bring that to bear as I face the things that come up as challenges, and also as I celebrate all of the reasons why we should have joy, including one of my most favorite things, which is commencement and getting students to that place when they're looking at that threshold of what will come next in their lives. I've spent my career at schools that view teaching and research as complementary, and I'm a believer in the value of broad-based liberal arts education and in lifelong learning. As a first-gen college student myself and a product of higher ed, as I've said, of public higher ed, rather, I ended up falling in love with small liberal arts colleges, and it has been a source of great joy and satisfaction for me to teach, to lead, to be inspired by young people. And I see them as being at the launching pad of their lives. And this is what it looks like, and this is, I know, what you're both looking forward to, and also nobody wants to rush this time along for our students. On a good day, when things are going smoothly, being a college leader and being on a college campus can feel like taking part in a bucolic scene from a Jane Austen novel. You can cue one of those soundtracks with the nice music playing, working within a community where people care about books, ideas, making the world a better place. On a bad day, oh yeah, because the Austen novels are public domain, you get this. And it does turn out that this book, Jane Austen and Zombies, is a pastiche that is lots of Jane Austen's novel, the actual prose of Jane Austen's novel, interspersed with zombies. But on a bad day, who knows? And for my part, when I started in 2019, I had a wonderful inauguration, celebration, and then in the spring, everything took a turn, right? So there are pandemics, interpersonal conflicts, passionate disputes, protests. Things can get rough. I'll note, too, that things have been hard for everyone. They've been hard for young people. I was talking to some of you about how your students got along in those early days of the pandemic. It's really just been, I think the word that we use is unprecedented, but somehow unprecedented again and again. It's very, very weird times, and I feel like we may be coming out of them into a new place, but who knows? This is going to be a rough week coming up, right? So now more than ever, I would say higher ed needs good leaders who support our institutional missions and who can withstand the pressures and stay the course. Now, admirers of Jane Austen frequently look to her for advice and counsel on how to live their best lives, and she offers a treasure trove of wit and wisdom. Although none of her protagonists are college administrators, surprise, each is engaged in finding her path and embedded within a hierarchical social context that limits her ability to act. They are learners, they find their place in the world, they forge life relations. In my experience, there are lessons we can draw from Austen's writing that are applicable to leaders in a variety of settings. I'll speak today about 5 attributes found within Austen's works that inspire me: curiosity, connection, humor, hope, and love. Attribute 1. Curiosity. Oh, I should note, by the way, I have a research assistant this year helping me with a paper I'm writing for next summer, Soraya Mwangi, and she designed my slides. Curiosity. Austen heroines are active learners. Curiosity is essential to securing their futures. In some cases, they might have mentors. In others, they must be close observers to figure out what their options are. They either possess a sense of self-worth or they develop it as they go along. Similarly, leaders need to approach our work with curiosity. This applies to the way we show up to meetings, manage disagreements, make new acquaintances, and maintain relationships. We should also be curious about what other schools are doing and how we can learn from one another. It's one of the reasons why I participate in meetings like the one I'm going to today and on different boards of organizations that are national boards. For my part, when I started my college leadership journey, I embarked on training. It's what I do. It's what we all do when we want to start something new. I continue now even to search out opportunities to train. I go to webinars or workshops. I have coaching. I read higher ed publications and books. I also took part in this wonderful experience of the American Council on Education Fellows Program. It's this year-long experiential learning that is part shadowing. I went to another institution and for really a full academic year shadowed a provost and chancellor and going to other institutions. And I did all that before I took my first administrative job, and that was transformative for me. I'd say when I started that out, I was admin curious, and then I began to see other people who were doing this work. I was impressed by them. I was impressed by what they were able to get done, and that led me to say, okay, I'm in. I'm gonna jump into the ring. So I also regularly encourage my teams to engage in professional development, and part of what I'll be doing in talking with chief academic officers at other institutions is encouraging them to do that as well. So from Jane Austen on curiosity, and I'll start really with the way that Austen inspires our curiosity about her. At the very beginning of the novel, no one who had ever seen Catherine Morland, the protagonist, in her infancy would have supposed her born to be a heroine. Now, I doubt that anyone imagines when they're young that they'll grow up to be a college president. This was way outside my field of vision. There are also barriers that are set up and obstacles for stepping into these roles. For anyone who is a first, like I was noting I am, you have to write your own story, and all too often you must convince those around you to accept it and you. Something that I'll say being president of Reed College is that I have colleagues who, as women or as lesbians or gay men or trans people might face prejudices in the town where they are or at the institution. I do not see that here at Reed College. And in fact, I will say that for my part, I believe I can advocate better and differently from my own subject position without feeling like I have to speak as a representative of any one position. And I think that's a cool thing about Reed. I spent most of my career in the classroom, teaching English literature, history of the English novel, Jane Austen, and comedy. My journey to this position began almost 15 years ago when I was asked to take on a leadership role in directing a center at Claremont McKenna. And then it turned out I liked this role, and my president and dean of the faculty nominated me for training programs, encouraged me to consider doing this. The carrot was ultimately imagining that I could do good in this line of work. So as I said at the beginning, I have a service-oriented kind of mindset. Now, I remind myself again and again to stay curious. Sustained learning, question asking, open-mindedness are superpowers. Listening is a superpower. In these jobs, no 2 days are the same. It's one of the advantages I found. We're always in a rapidly changing environment, both on the ground here and around us. So we need always to be taking in information, and it's essential that we avoid letting our vision be clouded by preconceptions. Curiosity will also prevent us from stereotyping constituents. And actually, I'd seen enough when I was a faculty member of the ways in which faculty could say, oh, admin, or admin could say, oh, students, or any of the ways that we do that. We have students, faculty, staff members, parents, alumni, trustees, all very interested in what's happening here and the future of the college. So there are so many constituents and opportunities to create us versus thems, and it's really important to find the ways to bring unity to those groups. And if you yourself in the leadership position are stereotyping constituents, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to do that really well. Which leads me to attribute number 2, connection. Now, Austen heroines are embedded in webs of connections. They need to find their allies, and ultimately, and as the point of the novel, as stories about young women, find their partners for life. They often face biases and marginalization. To be clear, the Jane Austen universe is primarily centered on straight, white, cisgendered people moving within circles of privilege. Inherent, though, in much of the drama are tightly wound power dynamics that have made the novels resonate in contexts far afield from Regency England. And we know adaptations like Clueless, for instance, high school setting, and there are other adaptations that transport Jane Austen around the world. There's a Bollywood adaptation in film of Pride and Prejudice. Bride and Prejudice, I think it's called. Because they focus primarily on women characters, they take women seriously within a revolutionary age in which questions around status and worth were leading to cataclysmic changes in the world. And I'll just note that for a long time, people assumed that Austen's novels were somewhat hermetically sealed away from those cataclysmic changes. And really only in the latter part of the 20th century did readers begin to say, wait a minute, we think maybe these novels are being read by some of the very people she was making fun of. So connections matter in the novels, and the protagonists have various degrees of agency to establish their identities as distinct from the circumstances surrounding them. One message of the Austen universe is that the family you're born into, your relative wealth and social standing, how others see you, these are not choices. But, at least in the fictional world, they need not define your potential and destiny. And for me, as a kid growing up in Oklahoma, I realized kind of early on that books were the leveling. Anyone can get books, anyone can read, and that kind of broke down class barriers. And eventually, as I decided to go further in my studies, I found that it continued to open up the world to me. And so, I think that there are parallels to the young characters in Austen's worlds trying to figure things out, and our students trying to figure things out. The novels, especially the early novels of Austen, are called novels of development, so they have nice parallels to students. I had a great time teaching a class focused entirely on Jane Austen and dropping Austen into a number of classes when I was teaching at Claremont McKenna. Now, for our part, college leaders have to represent our institutions. We're also embedded in webs of connections, and in many ways we stand as the figure for our institutions. And so the communities we serve depend on our ability to foster meaningful connections and relationships. It's not a stretch at all to say that we are characters in the story of our institutions, and that in playing our roles, our circumstances are simultaneously personal, we care deeply, and not primarily about us as individuals. We become the faces of our colleges and universities. What does my college need from me? Right, that question. Because it's about me. I've got to be the one who does it. But trying to find out what the role requires, right? There's something important about meditating on that. So this is true for the college presidency. One of the cliches we have is that presidents are the walking billboards. That's why I have so much Reed swag. So for Jane Austen, she writing to her nephew who was wanting to be a novelist, she said to him, 3 or 4 families in a country village is the very thing to work on, which I think is a kind of nice parallel particularly to a small college like ours. Now, in novels, homogeneity can be dull. If everybody was the same, there wouldn't be a plot. Plots emerge from protagonists entering into unfamiliar arenas or from new figures joining a hitherto samey environment. For our part, in seeking to ensure access, to bring diversity and inclusivity on our campuses, and also to dismantle some of the structures in the past that might have been obstacles to student success, we need to celebrate and champion the cultural wealth that arises from doing this work. We live in a time right now where diversity, equity, and inclusion are viewed with suspicion, certainly in the public narratives. And I think that much of that is fueled by misunderstandings of what we aspire to do in this work. I also worry that some of those who push those lines of criticism actually don't want an educated citizenry and worry about access and worry about education. By the way, when Jane Austen was writing, literacy was a contested area of discussion, literacy, being able to read. So when I note that Austen's novels could be inspiring to those who want to forge the stories of their own destiny, there certainly were those, when Austen was writing, who thought that it was better to keep the working class, enslaved peoples from reading. And so it's just noting that education has always been a force for freedom, and it's one of the reasons why we need to defend it. So I'll note here that the give and take of a multiracial, multicultural, equity-minded society can be complicated and not always harmonious. It is essential, though, that we continue to strive for inclusivity and equity. Our institutions are in some ways like small cities or little villages, and we send our students off to be engaged participants in the world around them. And what our students want is to be connected to students and others whose views are quite different than theirs, whose experiences are different. And we know that that will help them prosper in their futures. Now I want to turn to attribute 3, which has been very important to me in my life and research. Really early in my graduate work, I became interested in humor and satire and ended up writing about Jane Austen and other women's use of strategic humor and even subversive humor. I take humor seriously. I see it as a force for change, an arena of agency for the underrepresented and disenfranchised, and a source of power. Now, that being said, I want to note that humor can also be a tool used by oppressors and bullies. One humor scholar compared it to nuclear energy, a force that can be used for good or for evil and destruction. Understanding humor and bringing it into your life, though, I believe can give you strength. Jane Austen's most comic novel, Pride and Prejudice. This is a quotation that some might recognize from the very famous Austen heroine, Elizabeth Bennet. I dearly love a laugh. Having a sense of humor, I believe, is a survival skill. And there's lots of research on humans in extremely difficult, crushing circumstances that look for that moment to laugh together with those around them, to pull that energy in, to give them a sense of uplift. Finding joy, believing that things will get better, knowing that it may take time, but things will get better. For my part, this was sorely tested during the early days of the pandemic, and partly I'll say it's because humor is fundamentally social, and so lockdowns and distancing and all of the ways that we were broken apart were, in my view, limitations on our ability to find joy and also to experience those around us and benefit from the kind of connection that we have together. So what I found, and I think for all of us as we fall into crises, looking to the horizon, reminding ourselves of our duty to the institutions we lead. These are some of the ways that we can bring ourselves back to the sense of humor and balance. So one thing I'll say too, and I'll say a few things about humor for you, a few little nuggets, is that we think about humor and comedy as linked to the future, right? If insofar as comedy and tragedy represent two sides of human experience quite broadly, comedy is on the side of life and the future. It's why comedies, you'll find almost always, and this happens whether it's a sitcom or play, they'll end in marriage, they'll end in a feast, they'll end in a baby, right? TV comedies will often end with a new birth, like a series or one year's, the conclusion of that sequence will end with a birth. And that's because we see comedy as life-affirming. I'll also note again that comedy is fundamentally social. When in early comedy on television, they would put laugh tracks in, right? Because it was kind of to create the sense that other people were there laughing with you, the sense that it's going to be funnier if there's a laugh track. And we all know that it is certainly more fun and pleasurable to experience a play on the stage with peers and those around us than to read it. You have to kind of imagine some of the laughs. The other big thing I'll give you as a takeaway, and I can talk at length about this, and did a Paideia class a few years on theories of comedy. But generally, going back to that word universal, there's clearly no universal sense of humor. However, there are some things that are almost universally features of comedy, and one of those is that we laugh at incongruity. We laugh at when two things are opposite, the odd couple, right? We laugh at, we also laugh at surprises. Now, it's important to note that we laugh at surprises when they're resolved pleasurably. Surprises that are not resolved pleasurably, right? That's like the formula for the horror movie. A term I just learned from the New York Times is, because I'm not a film person, is the jump scare. Did you see that feature that they did in the digital version where they showed you the series of jump scares? Right, so now if it turns out that that's a clown laughing, it's all funny, right? We're able to be relieved and it's all better. So there's this kind of resolving that laughter does that is really important. In my world, I have many people here who, you can see the smiling faces of my colleagues. I think, in my office, we find occasion to laugh. I think that there are always ways in which if we feel like we're most strained, we will turn and laugh, right? And that helps us find some strength. So a sense of humor can be fortifying, and that brings me to my fourth concept, hope. Hope. So keeping hope when things around you look bleak, because those around us look to us for hope. Now, I've said some things about my experience here at Reed, but I want to note that when I first became a chief academic officer, I started in the summer of 2016. Now, there was a presidential election taking place that year, too. And without being partisan, I'll just say, and it won't be a surprise to anyone, that I had myself hopes that the country would elect our first woman president. And that's not how it turned out. I want to note, though, that for me at that time, in my first really big leadership role, I was attentive to what was happening and watched Hillary Clinton step up to the mic to give her concession speech after losing the election, and saw her walk to that microphone and smile. Years later, I saw footage behind the scenes of what preceded that speech, and that was Hillary Clinton with her team consoling them. But the image that struck was how she opened the door to go out on stage, and her expression changed. The face for the public was going to be the smile. She had to offer hope and grace to her supporters, and that smile spoke volumes. And even before knowing that, I knew it cost a great deal to be able to do that. And so in some of my first meetings with teams and students who many of them were struggling to understand what was happening, I realized that nobody wants their leaders to be melting down and falling apart, right? No, it is just true. And so again, it's that distinction between the human and the representative of the institution. So from Austen, I take a passage that is from the novel Persuasion, which is, although I don't have a favorite, I was talking about this last night, I don't have a favorite, this is certainly one that I value highly. This is the protagonist, Anne Elliot, speaking to the man she has loved for a long time. It's about to be very good, but at this point it's not. And saying, all the privilege I claim for my own sex, it is not a very enviable one, you need not covet it, is that of loving longest, when existence or when hope is gone. Now, those of you who have read the novel will know that this is a statement about sustaining hope in the face of disappointment. It's made by a long-suffering protagonist, and ultimately for her, that hope will be rewarded in a truly happy ending. She does go through quite a bit to get there, and ultimately she has to speak up, even about her hopelessness and hope, in order to finally break through to the object of her love. So this is something I've been really working on even recently, that the way that as college leaders, we have to find a balance between authentically showing our fears and worries and creating more anxieties in our communities if they do think we're freaking out. I think, parents, you do this with your kids as well, I'm sure. It's not easy, because everyone's watching to see, how's it look to us? Is there any reason for everybody to be falling apart? So it's also important that we draw on our networks of loved ones and those close to you, and I want to assure you that I have lots of people I turn to who help strengthen me so that I pay attention to the ways in which I need to get my energy up, and so that if there in those times when I may feel like I should go and cry in the corner and I have to come forward and smile, there need to be some people I can cry to. And I say this to all of you who are in positions where you have to do this dance as well. Here's something I'll say being at a college is that our students need us to help them believe in a brighter future. And that's something I'm deeply committed to. And my last attribute for today is love. Now, this is, of course, what most people think about when they think about Jane Austen, that she wrote love stories with happy endings. Now, just as I urge you to take the power of humor seriously, we should never, ever underestimate the power of love. And it irritates me, by the way, in doing humor scholarship, people trivialize humor scholarship. Oh, you work on humor. Or, oh, you work on Jane Austen, silly love stories, right? This is serious stuff. So I take a quote, though, from a frivolous character in a Jane Austen novel. She was one of those who, having once begun, would be always in love. This is a minor character whose propensity to always be in love is somewhat comical. But I do like the phrase, and this is in a completely different arena, but for those of you who know, I'm a huge Wilco fan, and there's a song called Always in Love. Listen to it, it's really fun. And I like the fact that there's an echo in that song of a Jane Austen line. To me, love is a North Star, a motivating energy, the love of learning, the love of students, teaching, research, love of our institutions. Love is what brings joy. And I can say to you that I've never been anywhere where that love of learning is as strong as it is here at Reed College. And in some ways, I'll talk about it as a kind of absence of irony or an ardency. Taking things seriously is what we do here at Reed. So Reed also has this tradition, of course, of fostering rigor and intellectual seriousness. But I encourage our community to think about the power of love and the light that's in love and the uplift that's in love, and to recognize this is not trivial, this is not frivolous, this is passionate. Loving Reed, as I did from the moment I arrived here, even before I arrived here, I'll say again, 2020 was a slog, that first year of the pandemic. It arrived in the spring of that year. We put the academic program online. We largely emptied our campus. And then we had pretty quickly to turn and spend the entire summer trying to imagine what it would be like to bring students to campus in the fall, to start back up again. We did it, and we succeeded. We succeeded because our students are magnificent. Everyone took care of one another. We took care to make sure that the campus was safe. But I'll note that it was, we had to reconfigure things so that it was one of the weirdest experiences in my academic life. We had distance, we had masking, we had a phrase or a word we used, de-densification. De-densification, right? And what that means is, it is certainly the opposite of community and connectedness. On Thanksgiving of that year, my wife, Cheryl, and I put hearts around campus. So we did this kind of surreptitiously. We didn't really want anybody to see us. And these hearts came to me years before. I had a student of mine from the Claremont Colleges had a website, and the website was called Love is a Radical Act. Love is a Radical Act. And she made these ceramic hearts with her wife, who sadly passed away a few years before the pandemic. But they made these ceramic hearts, and they were selling them online for something. So I ended up getting some of them when I was still in Claremont. And then after I arrived here, I was over in Vancouver, and I saw these hearts in a coffee shop, and I remembered, I think my former student, lives in this area. And so I was able to look up this student, and I got some more of these hearts. And so we put them up around campus, and we actually didn't reveal until an article that came out in the magazine until February that we were the ones who did it. So they were just these mysterious hearts that showed up. I don't have to tell you that they, over time, disappeared. And that was our intention, too, that people would would take them. I will say the ones that I got originally, I gave to friends and actually my office, we all have them. I've now given them all away, but and that was partly the point. But it was something, you know, a visual hope that we wanted to put around, and it made us feel, I guess, like we were leaving messages. It's aligned, by the way, with something I also fell in love with when I came to read, which is the weathergram, those strips of paper on trees that have calligraphed epigrams and other things on them, and so the hearts were another version of those. So even though the hearts themselves, you're not going to see them, I don't think. There was one outside of, on the south side of Elliott for a while, but I think it's gone now. I haven't looked for them in a long time, so they've disappeared. But I will note that the message and the meaning will always remain in my heart as I seek to do my best for this college I deeply love. I find motivation in my love for Reed, in my faith in the mission of higher education, and in the relationships I foster with this truly special community. It is my great privilege to be here for your students as they shape their stories and write this chapter, and I can't wait to see where their Reed education takes them next. Let me see. Thank you, and I think we have time for a couple of questions. Maybe one question. I'm sorry, I was realizing now I looked at my watch funny, but so we got our one question. Sorry about the short of time. Yeah.
My question is, in this day and age when I feel like education is questioned, the value of education is being questioned, how do you, obviously Reed is a very special place where your students already value that, but how do you, in the community, communicate what the value of a college education is to the greater world? And then obviously, the next step is liberal arts education, because it's enough to get people to just want to learn anymore, but liberal arts education is just learning for the sake of learning. So I guess my question is, how do you, as a president of an organization that values education, transmit that love of education into the greater community?
Great, thank you. And so, again, I know that you all need to get to more other things. So I'll just say, just briefly about that it is important that I speak out. I wrote an op-ed for the Chronicle of Higher Education that came out just a few weeks ago on the PR problem that higher ed has. And actually, I've been contacted by someone from the American Council on Education about my thought about what we need is I think we need a different kind of national, even advertising, promotional campaign to tell this story and to counter some of the negative things that have come out. And in that piece that I'm speaking of, I talked about the ad campaign that came out from the United Negro College Fund in the 1970s that had the slogan, some of you will know this, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste," and how that was influential on me. It helped raise a lot of money for underrepresented minority students to go to college, and also for me, not, as I said, being a first-generation college student, it made me think, college. So having something like that would be good here, and also having our faculty out and talking about their research, I think is always something that can be powerful. For those of you who were able to see the faculty presentations yesterday, you can see how our students are inspired on a daily basis and understand fully what the value of higher ed is. So I want to thank you again for being here and enjoy the rest of this day. And thank you also for having your students here with us. Thank you.